The DFS studio is brought to you by DraftKings. Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Yo, welcome in. It's the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast, September 12th. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew. Not bad for week one bets.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't incredible, but it wasn't bad either. Weird weekend, man. Weird weekend of football, I felt like. There was a lot of good, fun storylines, but also, like, a lot of just, like, what was that? like, what did we just see, from, like, the Bears offense? It was just a train wreck. And then the unfortunate side of things, right, with, like, the J.K. Dobbins injury, which was just, I feel so bad for him, the human being, just terrible. And then the Aaron Rodgers thing last night, I mean, it was, and then the game itself last night, like, I'm sure you watched the game, or I don't know if you stayed up, but, like, my goodness, what a game. And I felt like every emotion, just from, like, the disappointment to the Rodgers injury to, like, the insane return at the end with overtime. Josh Allen was 3 years ago playing YOLO ball against. That was kind of scary to watch. But man, it was a crazy weekend of football, as it almost always is in the NFL.
I feel always bad for you because I know your timeline just gets completely, swamped with people asking for injury analysis. And then the sad part is when bets, I feel like you're good about saying this is what this could be, as opposed to saying this is what this definitively is. But that gets passed around, and, we're still waiting on full stuff with Aaron Rodgers. We're recording this Tuesday morning, but you probably already see it. It's the frustrating part of fantasy football, and I know this is the part of your job that you get paid to do, but honestly, like, is there like a love-hate relationship with, like, injury stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's, like, I love the analysis part of it because it's not as easy as saying this is what it is, so just do this. Like, of course, there's a range of outcomes. Speaking of, Breece Hall looked awesome last night, and we talked about, look, like, he could be a guy that starts slow, but just is a league winner for you down the stretch. And man, if he's 100%, he houses that, 95-yarder that he took almost all the way. The defensive back caught him at the end, but that's an example. And, this stuff happens with, the kind of range of outcomes thing, which is how I always approach the injury analysis side of things. But yeah, man, it's part of what I do, but it's also, I think, a good edge in what we have sometimes. Like, we'll use that information for props, taking unders on guys that might not be 100% healthy, or, fading them in DFS if the field is on them. So just examples of that. But yeah, man, unfortunately, NFL injuries are a real thing, and they will continue to be a real thing. My buddy Edwin Porras with Fantasy Points, he had this statistic a couple years ago. Only 2% of NFL games are injury-free. That just tells you, like, the sport that these guys play and the game we try to analyze, you're asking for chaos every single week, and we certainly got it in week one.
So on this Tuesday episode, we're kind of reflecting. We're looking at, hey, what was part of the process from week one, what went well, and then we turn the page looking at week two, the state of the main slate. Like, here's the games you need to understand. Here's the players that are not on the main slate. For instance, Justin Jefferson and the Vikings play your Eagles on Thursday night, which will be a super fun game. You will discuss that in your Thursday night breakdown article in the DFS Pass. And then we give our salary standouts. Like, this is our first initial take of looking at the slate. Now, you can build a cash lineup, but that's not what Betz and I do on a Tuesday. We just get a pool of players and begin the process of DFS. So for Tuesday is looking at the slate. Wednesday is kind of looking at the games. I give a pace of play. Betz does a Vegas report. And then we move to Thursday and Friday, where we give you our picks and a pool of players that we think can work for you. So let's review what happened in week one.
Straight cash, homie.
Betz and I, every single week, will kind of talk about our cash process, who we gave the listeners, and maybe, just maybe, if you got to come out, on your double ups, your head-to-heads, whatever. This isn't a chance for us to boast. It is a chance for us to be transparent of just, here's what happened. Every single week, I write a cash lineup review article, which is therapeutic. I don't know, like it's just a great time for me to just say, here's what happened. Here's why I went wrong. Here's what I was doing this weekend. Like, I even got a shout out to my son Truman in the article because on Sunday I texted Betz this picture, but dude, I was floating down a river on Sunday right before lock, which maybe shocked some people.
I guess the good thing is we didn't have any like major slate breaking type of news that could have shifted things, at like 12:30 or whatever. But dude, yeah, you were chilling on the river in your floaty, in your raft, cashing some DFS lineups. So hats off to you, my friend. You had a very well balanced weekend and you came out in the green.
Yeah, and I think the majority of my process is the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that I've whittled down a lot of it. And there is news like Isaiah Likely was something that we moved with. And obviously at the end of the day, scored 1.4 points. But I wrote this up in my article. Punt plays will never be the thing that kills your lineup. It will be what you did with the major salaries. So if you struck out, go in a certain direction of a high price guy, then that's really tough. Like if you went for Jalen Hurts, I get it. Like he was part of our pool of players, but it's not where we landed. So for me, I had a great week in cash and double ups. My head-to-heads, I won a hundo, dude, which doesn't normally happen, but I won 100% thanks to Tyreek being our top play. He was on the cover of our top plays and was a player that you and I were all about. So Tyreek, Justin Jefferson, and Ridley were my 3 wide receivers, and then I threw in Marvin Mims as another punt. The Commanders defense, I just don't understand if you went a different way why you would do that. So that was that. Anthony Richardson. And then I had some snowflakes in my lineup, but I think if you had Tyreek, you could probably weather that storm. So it was a good week for me in cash.
Yeah, same. I played a very similar lineup. I landed on Anthony Richardson. The difference that we took is I ended up playing the running back duo of Jamal Williams and Raheem Mostert. And then I was able to get up to Jamar Chase, which felt great. I mean, before lock, after lock did not feel as great. Yeah, to show up to head-to-head with those 3 dudes, I mean, that's just insane. Those guys were all top 5 picks in redraft leagues for a reason. So that was, if I had a chance to do it all over again, I definitely would have played them for sure. The Jamar Chase didn't work out. We're going to talk about the Bengals on this show and probably this week. I love a buy low spot this week on Joe Burrow and his guys. I mean, how often does Joe Burrow literally give T. Higgins 0 yards? I mean, that's a 1 percentile outcome, right? That's not happening very often. So I love buying low on those guys this week. We'll talk about it. But yeah, I landed on a very similar lineup. I really did want to try to get up to Jalen Hurts just because we talked about Anthony Richardson. It was like, man, the projection is great, but it's so fragile. We don't know how good he could be. We don't know if he'll run. We think he'll run. And he ran. He ran a lot. And they definitely used him that way. And actually, I mean, I know some of the numbers were a little inflated, especially with like the Michael Pittman, screen pass, took it to the house. But dude threw for over 225 yards roughly. And no one was expecting that in his first NFL start. So I think the future is very bright for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, you and I looked at rookie quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round, what they do in week 1, and he was kind of above all of those metrics that we saw as an average. So that was nice. We want to give you a couple of things to keep in mind. Each week, we'll review our cash process, and then we'll kind of throw these in there. But for week 1, going to week 2, it's important for cash that you make sure you stay the course. Maybe you had a good week, maybe you had a bad week. For us, it was really good, and I have a lot of listeners that said thanks. But keep these things in mind. So I'll give one. Betz will give a couple. Just don't do shoulda, woulda, coulda. I that's my main thing. I say that every single year, but please don't say, if I just would have done this, I would have cashed. Like, you didn't. And I'm going to be the person that does the same thing. Like, oh man, if I just would have played Tyreek Hill, it's going to happen every single week. So instead of landing at that, because when you do that, you end up saying like, I was almost right. And there's a quote that Betz and I have done a couple times from a book we read about forecasting a while back, but we are more open to almost being right than we were almost wrong. Like, I look at my lineup and go, wow, I killed it, right? I also could look at my lineup and say, I easily could have landed on a different player, and that would have changed the course of my lineup. Like, I landed with Mixon instead of Chase, but I wouldn't say that like Mixon was a way better play. It's just where I landed. And so because I had Mixon, I didn't have Chase, and I just happened to avoid that. So it's actually like looking at a lineup and saying, like, instead of saying, I almost got it, it's like, hey, I actually almost could have gotten it wrong. So you're not too overconfident when things go right. So no shoulda, woulda, couldas is my first piece of advice.
Yep, that's always a good reminder, especially after week one, because it feels so easy to say in hindsight what you could have done or what you should have done, but think about the reason you played the plays you did and the process behind it. That's more important than actually being like, well, it worked or it didn't, sort of thing. So good reminder every single week on that one. Another thing to keep in mind is that when we're playing these cash games, people are going to make mistakes. And man, I say it every year. I feel like I say it every week, but sometimes I open these up and I'm just like, someone really decided to play Derek Carr in a cash lineup against me. Now, nothing against the person that did this. They may have had a good process and they thought that was right, but just to me, that was never on my radar. I don't think that was really on anyone's radar for a cash game. Could
maybe
you have said,
look,
I think
maybe.
Yeah. The Olave Michael Thomas stack, double stack if you wanted to go that route was so cheap, no one's going to play it. Sure. In a tournament, whatever. But like in a cash game, like just don't do that. Just don't do that. So there are people that will make mistakes, and that's why we still think there is an edge in cash.
No, I had a lineup that went against me that I was like, oh, this is easy. This person brought in Jordan Love and Aaron Jones stacked together. And I liked Aaron Jones. He's in my pool. And then, of course, I barely beat this person. Barely. And I'll just say this too. Head-to-heads, they help insulate your losses. So, I mean, I don't think my lineup was good enough to go 100%, to be honest. Like, it was fine. I probably had 3 snowflakes. But because of the mistakes other people made, then it was easy. I mean, Russell Wilson was a cash game quarterback for somebody. In a tournament, I'm fine with that. But there was no reason to go there when Betz and I kind of whittled the pool down to here's like 3 or 4 quarterbacks to look at, and he wasn't on there. So people make mistakes. And then I'll also add for my third thing to keep in mind, don't make dogmatic statements after week one. You don't have to. Like in the FanDuel millionaire, the person that won had 0 correlation, which has happened twice in the last 4 years. It just doesn't happen. And so I had some people ask me like, hey, does that mean that we don't need to stack as much? It's like, we have one game to basically go off of, and we don't want to write off everything else. We like stacking because 90% of the time it's going to be in the winning lineup, and it just happened not to in FanDuel. But in DK, you needed to stack, right? Like you needed Tua, Tyreek, Austin Eckler. That was in the Millie Maker lineup. So don't make dogmatic statements because of week one. Give yourself a little bit more room, especially on players that airball like T. Higgins. I put together his targets, air quotes, targets from week one. And I would say, 2 or 3 of those should count as targets?
Yeah, it was a rough showing from Burrow. I mean, Burrow didn't play the entire preseason with a calf injury, right? So It's not that shocking. And the weather, great defense from their defense in Cleveland under Jim Schwartz was awesome. And the scheme was great. You see Myles Garrett as he was approaching the line was doing a fake crossover hesitation basketball move and then rush the passer. Did you see that?
Yes. Dude, Myles Garrett.
What a guy.
He's just an athlete, dude. He knows what he's doing.
Unreal.
So yeah, don't make dogmatic statements about players, about usage, about everything else week one. I mean, I get we have to move fast. We don't want to be passive, but we also don't have to go all the way to this team will just be bad forever. So,
right.
Because I made a dogmatic statement at halftime of the Buffalo Jets game, all right, well, we know Buffalo's going to win this, and they didn't.
Spoiler alert. Jeez, Kyle, come on. And that's the thing, too, about the NFL, right, is nothing is ever as bad or as good as it might seem, because 6-7 days later, things change, right? We are all, if you woke up in a redraft league and you had Burrow or Chase or whoever, that was terrible, but that's not going to happen every week, right? We can't just get stuck to one week sample sizes. And I think the field does that sometimes a little bit too much. Now the field is getting sharper, but that does happen time to time.
You don't think you don't think that
go ahead.
Puka Nacua is going to be targeted on 40% of his routes again?
Dude, he's already wearing a gold jacket.
Dude, he is a fun player. He was fun in Dynasty.
He is.
We're going to talk about him on the Dynasty podcast because no big deal. I might have talked about him over the summer. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to remind everyone is just contest selection matters, right? Especially in week one, where there's so much hype, especially with these large field contests. I mean, you open your app, there's so many options. It's kind of overwhelming. But if you remember, this is my process and this is where I'm going, if you're finding the right single entry, large field double ups, people asked in Discord this week, hey, what's better, the one with 2,000 or the one with 20,000? The bigger the sample size, especially in these double ups, the more chance that opponents are going to make mistakes. And again, we want to limit the contests that we play, avoiding the multi-entries. Don't play in the double ups that are, 120 entries, 150 entries, whatever it is, because the best cash players in the world will enter the same lineup 150 times, and you're basically just making the contest harder for yourself. So go to a level playing ground with a single entry. Don't forget about your head-to-heads, and then just remember, your style matters. If you prefer to chase those huge, massive upside wins, like that's cool. Do your thing. Be rate conscious. Be smart about your contest size, but don't forget, there is, I think, some still edge in these smaller field contests, which is where I'll be living this year.
Yeah, and the one that I use in my cash article is the $25 double up, because I think it's at the price point that, you're getting less casual people, so it's a little bit more competitive, but keep that in mind, what the right contests are. We can post those again in Discord, which is my final point. Make sure that you find a friend to spar with, some people. So in the Discord, the DFS channel, other than like some start-sit channels that we have in the Fantasy Footballers, I feel like the DFS channel is the most active channel we have in the Fantasy Footballers right now. And you get to go back and forth. Hey, does this cash lineup make sense? Hey, well, what do you think about this lineup? People are getting to give you advice, and you get to talk with other people. So that's one of the perks if you get the DFS pass. So make sure you get in on that. But we also want to celebrate some of those people. Man, Betz, we had some big winners that were DFS Pass subscribers. I'll let you read this first comment from your boy Possum J.
Yes, one of the most active members we have in Discord, and had an awesome week, almost had an even bigger week, but played a Tua Tyreek Ayuk stack, and those guys went bonkers. So he said, shout out to Betz and Borg and the whole team. This was an optimizer lineup that I played. I entered Tua, Tyreek, Ayuk, and it filled in the rest for me. You guys have an amazing product. DFS Pass for life.
Yeah, I mean, and it obviously paid for itself right away. They went over a K. Matt Hakeem, who's actually our tournament takes writer that we added this year, he had a monster win where he won 70K. He's Lord Matty Ice, and he will be in the Discord this week getting to chop it up with you people. So when we say we're bringing in people that know what they're talking about, week one, Matt Hakeem just came out just swinging. And then we also had a Sunday night football big winner, Chris C324. He won 10K on the Cowboys and Giants game with a build that was Cowboys defense in the captain spot, Tony Pollard, and then just threw in Saquon. But like that game, you basically needed to think the Giants are going to poop the bed. I need to stay away from them. And the Cowboys are going to, basically have the greatest defensive performance of all time. So that's awesome. We'll give some shout outs every single week on this Tuesday show. Our Discord members, awesome people. But if you want to get the DFS pass, like I said, it can pay for itself in 1 week. Use the promo code DFSPOD. You can save 10%. If you bought the Ultimate Draft Kit, you can upgrade at an even cheaper price. But go to dfspass.com if you want to get that. But let's talk about week 2.
State of the main slate.
Betz and I each week will refer to the DraftKings Sportsbook line. It's where Betz and I play. You can go to sportsbook.draftkings.com, and we're going to check in with a couple of wagers that we made ahead of this week 2 kind of preview. And I just want to say, Betz, Amon-Ra looked great, but not great enough in week 1 because he hit his under, as we talked about on this podcast. I mean, what a win for me.
Were you sweating it?
Oh, yeah. He was at 71 yards or something.
Yeah, I think his receptions prop too was 6.5, and he had like 4 or 5, like, in the first half or like the first minute of the third quarter. Like he was like right there, and it was like, oh, this is going over. And then it didn't.
Yeah.
And then it didn't. But it was a nice balance, right? Because we had him on one of our best ball teams. I have him everywhere, of course. But you also had his props. So you had the best of both worlds. You got the touchdown, but you also got the under on the yardage.
Yeah, the Hannah Montana of props is a good feeling when you get the best of both worlds. Yeah. It's not saying can Amon-Ra hit this number. Yes, he can. But over the course of time, it's a good bet to hit the under on this, and that's why I brought that setup. I'll tell you one where I took a bath, because I had a couple of parlays where I placed them when I was in Arizona, and I hit 3 of the 4 legs, and the only part that I didn't hit was freaking Vikings money line. It killed me.
Baker Mayfield, baby.
Dude, I mean, it's not shocking with the Vikings because of how volatile of a team they are, but like, come on. At home against the Buccaneers, it's okay if you don't cover, but win the game.
Yeah, that was rough. And that was a fishy line too. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but like as you got closer to kickoff, it was like +6 early in the week and then +5.5 and then +5 on like Sunday morning. And I was like, ooh, weird vibes around the Vikings. And dude, Vegas always knows,
I took
man.
the Buccaneers plus the points in our pool. We have a pool that we do for our company that's super fun every single year. But Vikings money line felt like at home this should happen. But so those are my two from this past week.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to a reminder for everyone. Like, you don't have to pay extra because DFS Props is already in the DFS Pass for you, player props. There's no extra subscription. There's no extra weekly payment. Like, it's just what you pay for the DFS Pass. You get this every week. We went 5-3 in week 1. Very fun, up 2.38 units. But I want to give a shout out to a preseason bet that I made. And I remember on the show, you said, I don't know, man. I just don't see it. He was suspended, for gambling. How will the league feel about that? Calvin Ridley is him. He looked awesome, dude. Awesome in week 1. And I got him at 75-1 for comeback player of the year. Now, these markets will change so much week to week, so I don't want to overreact, but he's all the way up to 10-1 after 1 week of football. So we'll see, man. We'll see. If he keeps it rolling and the Jags can win a bunch of games, I think it's in the range of outcomes.
We'll probably do a segment maybe halfway through the year where we talk about more of the awards market because it is so emotional. It's basically what just happened, and things change over the course of the year. So DeMar Hamlin was the favorite. He was inactive in this game. I promise you things will change as over the course of stuff. But yeah, that was a great bet. Let's take a quick break and then we'll break down the slate.
What's up, Foot Clan? This episode is brought to you by Hulu Plus Live TV. Hulu has live sports. Watch your favorite football teams all season long with over 90 live channels, plus access Disney Plus and ESPN Plus all in one plan. No cable guy, cable box, or extra cable fees needed. Switch to Hulu Plus Live TV today. Live TV plan required. Restrictions apply. Access content from each service separately and select ESPN Plus content via Hulu. Learn more at hulu.com.
All right. What we like to do each week is break down the slate and tell you which teams are on it, which aren't. So I mentioned earlier, Vikings and Eagles will not be on the main slate. That's the Thursday night game. And then Dolphins and Patriots is Sunday night. And then we have 2 Monday night football games this week and next week. So the slate is actually a little bit smaller. The main slate we talk about for DFS is down from 13 to 12 games. So it's a little different. And I just want to say the afternoon slate is gross. There are some gross games. None of the games are over 45. So we'll talk about how to approach that. But Betz, give me the 50 plus total games and the teams that have the highest team implied totals.
Yeah, this is sort of it just feels like kind of, week 1, we're just going to parlay that into week 2 because there's only one game and it's where it was last week, with the Dolphins and the Chargers at 51. It's KC and Jacksonville. And then we've got a bunch of these games just like last week that are kind of in the upper, to mid 40s. So I feel like it profiles as a very similar slate from a totals perspective. As far as the team totals, leading the way, we've got Buffalo, then Detroit, Kansas City, San Francisco, who looked incredible in week 1. And then the market is not overreacting to what we saw from the Bengals last week. They are 5th highest on the week in terms of their team implied total.
No, I liked seeing that with the Bengals because I think they're a team that you and I are going to be higher on this week. I was pretty low on them last week, and I was fortunate to not have any Burrow stacks. But you and I usually look at these games and say who are going to be the most popular games to stack. And I just want to mention right off the bat, Seattle at Detroit is a game that people will have some type of nostalgia. Like, okay, there is something about these two teams. And last year in week 4, 48-45 was the final score. In the Millie Maker, this was the full-on game stack. There were 6 players from this game. Lions home games last year averaged 58 points per game. And Jared Goff, his home road splits is something we always talk about. Last year, he averaged 21 fantasy points per game, 35 pass attempts, 274 passing yards, and the most important part, 2.6 passing touchdowns per game. This was also the game, I forgot about this, that we hit on the long shot prop of Rashad Penny to lead the week in NFL in rushing yards, which is just bananas that I just totally forgot he was even there. So, this game right now is at 49. Do you expect it to be around 50?
It's hard to say because Seattle looked so bad last week.
Logged out in the second half.
In the first half, they actually looked pretty decent. I don't know what happened at halftime, but they just could not do anything. Aaron Donald just wrecked that game. He's unreal. But I think that this one probably will be pushed up. I mean, you have the narrative of last year's matchup, right? You've also got the Lions at home narrative, which, I mean, there's numbers to it, so it's not just a narrative, but like the public knows that, people know that. And so I do think this probably will creep up as the week goes on, but we'll see, come Friday when we record.
Yeah, so Seattle-Detroit, I think is going to be a popular game. And then we had this game last year, and I think it's just going to be another one that people love, but it's Kansas City at Jacksonville. The Kelsey news is what we're still waiting on, but it seems like things are trending that he will play.
Yeah, it sounds like he never really had a chance in week one, but it sounds like they avoided worst case scenario, and kind of day by day, he's gotten a little bit healthier. So we'll see as the week goes on. This one, it is worth noting, opened at 50, was already bet up to 51.5. So I think the public or people putting their money on this rather do think Kelsey plays. And obviously if he does play, that elevates the ceiling of the game, makes Mahomes stacks look a lot cleaner, very clean bring back if you want Trevor Lawrence stacks. So I think Kelsey is the key here, but I also could see the people playing it just because, look, week one was terrible. Like for all the dudes in Kansas City, but their price is so cheap. So if you want to play a Mahomes double, if Kelsey's out, you can do it easily. If you need a cheap bring back on a Lawrence stack, you can do it easily. So the total, teams we like, fun up, high upside game environment makes a lot of sense. And then with how good Calvin Ridley looked last week, I do expect him to be quite popular this week.
Mahomes is at 8,300. We'll talk about salaries in a second, but obviously we didn't have him on the slate in week one. We didn't have Josh Allen. They're both on this slate this week. So the pay up options are a little different than maybe what you were thinking last week. We'll talk about the salary movers, but sneakiest game for me on this slate, I just need to say it, is the Chargers at the Titans. Ryan Tannehill looked like the worst, like should not be in the league. You should be gone, but obviously they look at their options, go Malik Willis, Will Levis. Nah, we can't do that yet. So Titans look terrible, but it's a game in Tennessee, and the Chargers are known for being a run funnel defense. So this sets up so well. Derrick Henry at home, and the Chargers passing attack against a terrible Titans secondary. So I just think the game makes a lot of sense. Like when I look at it, like, okay, you double stack Justin Herbert, and you have Derrick Henry in there, and you just kind of go from there. So it's expensive, but I think it works a lot. And then I'll say this about the Chargers. Betz and I love the Chargers. We're suckers for them. And I knew I was going to get hurt, but I had to explain to my family when we were watching the Chargers game, because Justin Herbert is my son Houston's favorite football player. I had to explain to them, hey guys, so when you watch a Chargers game, you have to expect to be disappointed. That's just how it works. That's how they're going to do it. And when they went up like late in the game, I was like, okay, just know this is how this works. It will be bad. And there's a couple of plays from that Chargers game, like right before the half, that stupid pass interference call, and then they gave up a field goal. And then a couple plays like, just guard Tyreek deep. Like, what are you doing? Are you expecting, Durham Smythe to beat you? So anyway, Chargers, Heartbreak City.
Yeah, everyone knew the ball was going to Tyreek, and they still couldn't defend him. I mean, it's just, he's so good. The other thing with the Tennessee situation, there was a lot of Tajay Spears on the field in week one, and there was a quote immediately after the game from Vrabel saying, like, it wasn't in relation to that specifically, but he said a lot of stuff happened in week one that, isn't our norm. I'm paraphrasing. So, like, I would not be shocked if at home they just feed Henry, 25 carries or something like that. So I like the contrarian approach here, Kyle, to buy back in to a Ryan Tannehill offense. What could go wrong?
So, yeah, you're telling me a contrarian take that also includes the Chargers is part of my game plan? Like, that sounds right up my alley. The headline that people said was Tajay Spears outsnapped him. He took all the third downs. What if I told you? This is just pulling this out of thin air. What if third downs don't matter? They don't matter. So
you've already told us.
They need to know again.
Talked about this a little bit already. I really want to buy back into this Baltimore-Cincinnati game. It's sort of that secondary game total where it's not at 50 or 51. It's kind of right there in the high 40s. But look, the Ravens just lost J.K. Dobbins. They've got some offensive line injuries. I don't think they're going to try to run a ton in that situation with Justice Hill and Melvin Gordon and Gus Edwards, and no disrespect to those guys, but their best way of having an explosive game is getting Mark Andrews back in the lineup, getting Zay Flowers involved, who looked great, throwing the ball, Bateman kind of in his second game back off the injury. Like, it all lines up, I think, for more passing for Baltimore this week. So I really want to buy into that. And on the other side, we already talked about it, like Joe Burrow and the Bengals, they're not going to have a game as bad as they just had probably for the rest of the season, right? So I love buying back into that. And quietly, a very, very key injury in Baltimore secondary. They just lost one of their better safeties, Marcus Williams, to a torn pec. He's going to be out in this game. I want to fire up Jamar Chase. I want to fire up T. Higgins and Joe Burrow this week.
Yeah, and Zay Flowers is a fun player to add. He went up $1,000 in salary, so that's a pretty big price hike. But I think this game, there's a lot of different ways to stack it. Which game do you want to be underweight on? And I just want to quickly say, last year we faded Denver, like when we realized who they were and just said they're going to hit their under over and over and over again. Washington was another team. They happen to play each other this week. And last year you looked up the stats. They were combined 67% to the under. Both of them went under last week. And these teams play slow, like just super slow. Denver was 31st in seconds per play. Washington, what a weird game to be able to say like, hey, you could stomp on this team. And the Cardinals just kind of hung around for a while. I thought we were going to get Sam Howell kind of like unleashed and throwing down, but the McLaurin injury, like he looked like not fully himself. So I just think this is a game you don't even have to go there.
Yeah, for sure. And like, Washington fans, it's great. You won week one. They did not play well. They looked, discombobulated. The offensive line was a wreck.
They didn't lose. That's how I looked at it.
Right, totally. They did not play very well. The offensive line was an absolute train wreck, and that's not just the line, but quarterback play matters. Sam Howell, as an experienced offensive line, was allowing pressure left and right. 15.4% pressure rate allowed was the fourth worst in week one. Now they go on the road as a dog, taking on Denver, who has a great defense, and they, have an awesome secondary. So it would not be shocking to see Washington go in there and lay an egg. And then, like you said, how can you have any confidence on Denver's side? It's kind of more of the same of last year, where it's like you're left wanting more every week. Now, granted, Jerry Jeudy was out. He's a key piece of the passing offense, so maybe if he's back, it's better. But Washington has a pretty solid secondary as well. So I think this one's going to be a very low-scoring, kind of gross game environment. I'm with you. I would like to be fading the Giants and the Cardinals at just 38.5 team implied or game total rather. Look, the Giants, it's never going to be that bad again. It's never as good or as bad as it seems in the NFL, but you can't take anything away from that week one game, except for the fact on their very first drive, on the plays that counted, so not including a penalty or a fumble, they called a run play 8 out of 9 of the plays on their first drive, and they moved the ball extremely well against Dallas, and they had the field goal, attempt blocked for a touchdown, and it was over from there. But they were run heavy last year. I think that's what they're going to want to be in this game. Now they're favored, taking on Arizona, and it's tough for Josh Dobbs. He was thrown into the fire, so to speak, but they only logged a 46% neutral pass rate. Dobbs had a 4.44 YPA and 5.8 ADOT, both of those 26th in the NFL in week one. So it's just not the game environment you want.
I can tell you that Saquon is going to be my player pool at 8K in this matchup because of how run heavy they were. So I also like that you hit on that Joshua Dobbs call on his passing yards. You hit the under, right?
Yeah, I was shocked that they had it where it was. It was opened at like 210.5, I believe, and then got bet down to like 195-ish, somewhere in there. I'm shocked they opened at that line with the weapons and Hollywood Brown injured and all that stuff. So yeah, we definitely took the under there.
All right, a couple more categories. Which team are you most confident hits the over? I'm going to say the San Francisco 49ers because they looked freaking awesome, and I also think the Rams defense looked way better than it should have in the second half of that game against the Seahawks. So I think the 49ers are a team. They have a 26-point team implied total. They're on the road, and they're 8-point favorites. I think that they're a solid team. And in that afternoon window, like the games this week and the way that people are going to stack is going to be so heavy on the early window that I think the 49ers are going to give you some contrarian options if you're stacking.
Yeah, I like that call. We'll talk about their salaries in a minute, but they did not move nearly enough for how good they looked in week one. I kind of like Atlanta to go over their total. And I'm not saying Atlanta's going to be this hotbed of fantasy goodness every week, but their run game, dude, it's just so efficient. And yeah, if I was Arthur Smith and I was winning games, I wouldn't force it to, London or Pitts either. They're just so good at moving the football, how they do. And, Green Bay historically has been pretty bad against the run. Now, in week 1, they looked great because Justin Fields fell on his face. The offensive line didn't play very well in Chicago. And it's just a 1-week sample. So I'm not really here to say that Green Bay is going to stop this rushing attack. I think they can easily get 20 points in this spot.
Yeah. I'm a Falcons fan, so I can't really...
I can't be optimistic about anything in life.
Ritter did what he was supposed to do, like in the sense of, like Arthur said, don't do anything off script. And so
throw the ball where I tell you to throw the ball, and put the ball in the belly of Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson as many times as you can.
18 pass attempts. He was 4 of 5 on play action. So they're like, hey, we're going to give you an opportunity, 3 or 4 times to actually do something. So who really knows what they really are, but fun team, man. The Falcons are a fun team apart from fantasy, which is like splitting my soul in two. I love this team and I do like fantasy, and I feel like people just hate the Falcons. Which team are you most confident hits the under of their team implied total? I'm putting the Raiders. They're on the road against a Bills team that the defense looked just fine. The defense was totally fine. It was Josh Allen imploding with those turnovers. So I think Las Vegas should not have won that game against Denver this past week. I didn't think they deserved to, but I also think that Broncos didn't deserve to even be close either. So I think Las Vegas, you can actually do some bring back, but other than that, like I don't want to stack Jimmy G.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example of kind of a get right spot, right? They have that classic letdown on Monday Night Football. They easily should have won that game. Now they go home. They're taking on Jimmy G on the road in Buffalo, a game where the Raiders feel suddenly great about themselves after a win against Denver. This is a classic letdown spot for the Raiders here, taking on a motivated Bills team after that loss. So I like that call quite a bit. I'm going to throw out Chicago. Look, Justin Fields, when he runs, he's going to be great for fantasy, but I don't know if he's a starting quarterback in the NFL long term. Like, they did not move the ball well, tons of turnovers, still the same stuff we saw last year. And it is that completely different conversation of fantasy versus real NFL, quarterback play, and it's just not there yet. So I think this looks like a decent spot to fade the Bears.
All right, let's look at our salary standouts.
Salary standouts.
The chance, really the opportunity for us is to say, here's some dudes. Like, we're looking at this on a Tuesday. Start off here. I'll have a full article, a first look article that's out in the DFS Pass that kind of gets to tease out some of this. So this is us, our initial takes of saying, we looked at the salaries, it's Tuesday. Okay, so do not take this as a final word. Once we get to Friday's show, you'll go, oh, what happened to that guy you mentioned? It's like, well, we actually put some projections together. So when you're building a lineup, it's not just feel or gut. I like this player. You don't want to just be stuck in the mud.
These are just our takes off of vibes, just straight vibes right now. No numbers.
That's what Tuesday is, just a vibe day, right?
Oh, for sure. We're kind of turning the page. We're recapping. We're turning the page a little bit, looking ahead. Just here for the vibes.
Okay, so my first thought was Josh Allen under 8K in a bounce back spot. Sounds awesome. So he's 7.9 on DK. And then the dudes, Goff and Geno, are going to be players that people play a lot from that Detroit and Seattle game. So Goff has 6.2K, Geno at 5.9, who looked terrible. But I mean, right? A Geno double stack makes a ton of sense in tournaments if you're going to stack up this game. So those are the guys that initially I say, hey, put them in your pool right now.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, anytime you see that price and you know that we had the offseason takes that we did for a reason, you want to just make sure you're not overreacting to a 1 week sample. So yeah, Geno looks like a decent bounce back option, especially for tournaments. I'm not sure if you can go there in cash with the lack of confidence, but you got to at least feel good that, you can fire him up, and the stack is very affordable. So love it for tournaments. Also throw out Trevor Lawrence, 6.7K, and then Joe Burrow at 6.9. They're kind of in the second tier of pricing, but we know that the ceiling is there, especially we talked about it for Burrow. It's never going to be that bad again. And then for Lawrence, like, there was some stuff on tape, but there was some incredible stuff on tape too. If Mahomes has his full, weaponry, that game looks pretty awesome. So very interested to see what happens here with Trevor Lawrence throughout the week.
At running back, I mentioned Saquon earlier at 8K. He's going to show up just based on usage, game script, favored, and Cardinals. That's kind of like the game we're going to keep playing, right? Last week, if you would have played Brian Robinson, you would have been happy for what he did at 5,100. So I like Saquon at 8K. Ken Walker in that Detroit game is only 5.8. I'm kind of interested in going there. He's a value. And then in the same game, Jahmyr Gibbs at 6.3. You and I, our main takeaway was like, okay, this guy is only going to show up more and more and more, especially on a full PPR site. Like, it's hard for me to play him in cash, but I want to play Jahmyr Gibbs in tournaments if I'm going to stack that game.
Yeah, you can't play him in cash. There's no way after he played 27% of the snaps in week 1. But one of the things that I love to do in tournaments, especially with these rookies, is sort of play it before you see it. So you don't want to wait, 4 weeks from now, and then all of a sudden, if Gibbs' usage does go up week after week after week, and all of a sudden he's like 7K or something, you don't want to be late to the party, so to speak. So I think that's a very sneaky take. He probably won't project very well, truthfully, in optimizers, in projection sets, just because it's hard to from a math perspective, it's hard to make him look incredible without seeing it first. So he's going to be one of those guys that is not cash viable, but I think if that game stack is one you're after, makes a lot of sense in tournaments. We talked about the Tennessee and the Chargers game. I think Derrick Henry at 7.4 looks totally solid this week. That's a price we've been willing to pay in the past. He's gotten up to 8K, 8.2K, 8.3K, and we've played him. So at 7.4 seems like a nice opportunity here. And also throw out, we got to monitor the Austin Eckler injury that, didn't really notice much during the game. I know Mike talked about it on the show, which, dude, don't come for my job, Mike, okay? But Eckler dealing with an ankle injury, we found out on Monday from Brandon Staley. Josh Kelly, man, he looked pretty good in that game. 16 carries, over 90 yards and a score. If Eckler is limited or out, Josh Kelly at 5K would be one of those solid cash plays. Now, granted, it is against Tennessee, and this feels like Jamal Williams 2.0 from last week, where it was so inefficient and so bad that I might fade him in a tournament. But if you had him, at 5K for cash games, he'd be totally fine.
I also want to just throw out Tony Pollard. Looked great on Sunday night. I know it was kind of limited opportunities, but 7.5. They are now 7.5 point favorites. The Cowboys are against the Jets. That line obviously moved a ton with Aaron Rodgers news. So he's interesting. At wide receiver, I just want to mention Jamar Chase's splits against Baltimore as a buy low spot. 7.9K. Against the Ravens, he's played them 5 times, including the playoffs. His target count, 10, 10, 12, 13, 12. So if I told you you're getting 10 targets right now, you would be super happy. Here's the lines. 8 for 201 and 1, 7 for 125, 7 for 50, 8 for 86 in a score, and 9 for 84 in a score in the playoffs last year. So Jamar Chase right now is probably going to be my top play. I'm saying this as of Tuesday. And we'll probably get some value, but probably my top play of the week, especially because we don't have Tyreek or Justin Jefferson on this slate.
Yep. Can't argue with any of that. We've already talked about the Bengals a ton on the show, so I am with you. And those stat lines are absolutely incredible. What are your thoughts on Diggs at the top? He's 8K, taking on the Raiders. We talked about Josh Allen, kind of buying back in at home. What are they, 9.5 point favorites? Massive team total. I think Diggs is going to project super well.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to with salary. Josh Allen, I initially was like, I want to play him in cash. You can play that stack together against a terrible Raiders secondary. I like Chase. So if we get some value here, like a Josh Kelly, then I think you can play both Chase and Diggs. And last week, that was just plain fun to be able to play 2 or 3 stud wide receivers in your cash lineup. It's totally possible. So love Diggs, 10 for 102 and 1 yesterday. So that was pretty nice. And then the Jaguars wide receivers, Ridley is the clear play, and his salary went up $700. And Kirk went down because he wasn't great, but I think Kirk is an interesting name to put on your tournament radar. He's only 5.1K. So I think the Jaguars passing attack is something you can use in cash and GPPs.
Don't forget about Zay Jones, dude. I don't know how good Zay Jones is, but that catch was incredible. And this is not just like a 1 week thing. He was good last year for that team, and he's playing a ton. So for tournaments, that's why I love Trevor Lawrence stacks, is because I think it's not mandatory, but I think most weeks we're going to want Lawrence and Ridley, and then you just pick your second option. It could be Evan Ingram. It could be Christian Kirk. It could be Zay Jones, and those guys are all super affordable. So I like that call on Christian Kirk specifically for tournaments. But just to speak to Ridley, dude, 97% of the routes, 35% target share, and over a 30% first read target share, aka he is Trevor Lawrence's dude, and he is the alpha. So even though he went up in salary, I think he's still underpriced.
What's funny about Ridley, talking as a Falcons fan, is he's not fast. It's kind of like Diggs. Diggs isn't fast, but he's football like quick and just moves better with pads on. So it's one of those players that like, is he the best athlete like wide receiver? No, like he's never going to be that. But the way that he gets open, manipulates his body, route running, that's really all you need in the NFL. So I agree with you. I think Ridley, you can still play. He's only going to go up from here, right? Like he should be 75 to even up to 8K in the next, couple weeks. So keep that in mind. Big Mike Williams, ready to hurt us again in a tournament. He's at 5.7 against Tennessee. That is screaming for us to play a Derrick Henry, Mike Williams correlation in tournament and get hurt again. But I just want to put on your radar bets because I know that you're emotionally attached to him.
I'm ready to lose more money, dude. You don't have to tell me twice. I will happily click the button, and I am ready for a snowflake in my lineup. So let's go.
Yep. Tight end. I just wrote good luck in this because we don't have information yet about Kelsey or Andrews. So that's up in the air. And if those two aren't playing, then it's once again a situation where you're probably going to punt. It's not great. Adam Troutman is 3K, and we just got news that Greg Dulcich is going to miss multiple weeks. So 3K is a punt. Isaiah Likely, people will not want to go back there because they were burned. But remember, that wasn't the thing that hurt your lineup, right? Tight ends were just gross across the board. Hunter Henry was the tight end one in fantasy this past week, and you really didn't need him. I played him in a couple tournaments, but like didn't matter. Noah Gray is who you wrote down, 3.4. So, I mean, it's just punting, right?
Yeah, and Gray's usage was fine. I know it was Blake Bell that got the touchdown, but I mean, he played 88% of the snaps and he saw 5 targets. And at 3.4K with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, that's totally fine for cash at his salary. So, of course, we need Kelsey to be out for that to be a play. But yeah, I think if those guys are out, Kelsey and Andrews, like there's not that much separating the 3K guys from the 4K guys. So I'm going to try to save money if I can.
So defense this week, we don't have to mention it very much, but there's a lot of options in tournaments that I think you can go. So the Ravens, all right, against Joe Burrow, who didn't look great, but we could probably buy back there. The Jaguars against Patrick Mahomes at home are interesting. All of these options are below 3K, by the way. Super interesting. The Falcons against Jordan Love at home. The Titans at home against the Chargers. Like, there's lots of different routes you can go with defense. The Packers against the Falcons. Like, I like the defensive GPP options. And I guess if you just wanted to play Washington at 3.1 in cash, like, just do it again. I don't care.
Yeah, they seem fine. I wish they were cheaper. I hate paying more than 3K in cash, but it depends what value options we get. You might be able to fit them. We'll see. But, as we say, we're always trying to save money at the position. But if you can get up to them, I think they're pretty solid this week, taking on Denver. Russ concerns, Judy's still banged up, so it makes a lot of sense.
If you want to play with us every single week, go to ballersdfs.com. That will direct you to our DraftKings League, Fantasy Footballers DFS Borg Betz. But here's the most important thing. If you're saying to yourself, oh, I'm already in the league, look at the contests that are already in there. Like last week, we had 1,000-person contest that didn't totally fill, and so we had some really good overlay from people that just didn't enter the contest. We have over 5,000 people in the league, but sometimes people just don't even look at the contest. So if you're looking for a contest, look in our DraftKings League. Betz will have one for Thursday night, and we get to add some other ones that are super fun. We had some listeners for the first time win some tournaments because they were playing with people like us who, I don't know, we're real soft around our listeners. Like we're fine in other places, but super soft. You can bully us, take our money, whatever you need to in our DraftKings League, ballersdfs.com. That'll do it for this episode. We'll be back on Friday to get to talk about the Slate bets. Tell everyone bye.
Yes, just the vibes today, dude. But we'll be back with numbers and spreadsheets for Friday to help you all win some money. Hope you have a great week. Enjoy. We will catch you on Friday to preview the Week 2 main slate.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.